Randy, great to see you here. Thanks for joining the call. I've been sort of following Salesloft after you came in, and it just feels like you guys are doing something great and on something great as well because of all the AI advancements. So just great to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. There are a lot of great things going on. It's an interesting time. Hasn't been boring for sure.
Awesome, Randy. I think actually before we go in, I would love to understand what your vision for Salesloft looks like right now with all the AI stuff coming in, with the Drift acquisition, just like what is like going on in your mind in terms of what Salesloft stands for the next few years?
Yeah, that's a good question as an opener. I think our point of view on where the world is today is that when we talk to customers, they are dealing with a couple of major changes that have taken place, right? One is from the economic perspective. Right. We're in a post-pandemic world, obviously. There's been supply chain disruptions. The era of free and abundant cash is over. And all of that's conspiring to create an environment where profitable growth is really important to organizations of any industry. The second trend that is certainly prevalent as well, that we hear talked about a lot, and then the question is, what do you do about it, is the buyers have changed in B2B selling a lot, right? We've seen all the research on how much buyers do before they engage vendors. We've seen the research around buying committees getting larger and larger. And I think that's especially true in this environment where companies become risk adverse. And so the teams get bigger. And as I always like to say, the bigger the buying committee is, the more people that can say no.
Right.
And so you put those two things together, and we see organizations sort of dealing with the great growth squeeze. Right, the models that they've had before, the engagement models they've had for dealing with prospective buyers don't work as well as they used to. And over the years, when there was all this abundant money, people invested a lot in MarTech and sales tech and everything. So I've got this sprawl of IT as well. And with an imperative to get back to predictable growth, that's got to be profitable growth now. Yeah. The question is, how do you do that? And so our viewpoint on that is that what you really need is a durable revenue engagement model. And that's how you're going to get a performance multiplier, is if you can get your organization aligned around a durable revenue engagement model, that's going to get you back to more predictable, but yet profitable growth in the new era that we're dealing with.
That's very helpful context, Andy. On that note, one thing I was hoping to hear your thoughts on was, I was going to share a quick little slide that you had posted on LinkedIn, right, in terms of what the future of revenue orchestration looks like. And I sort of intuitively understood, and it sort of made sense to me, but I would love to hear your thoughts on what is this that you're trying to sort of accomplish, both in the product, but also what you think is the future.
Yeah, so you hit on a key phrase, right? So how do you get to this durable revenue engagement model? Well, we think fundamentally it's about revenue orchestration. It's around, how do I get the entire go-to-market team working together to engage buyers from the very first touch all the way through to close, to expansion, to renewal, cross-sell, and everything else. So it's a lifetime of engagement. So I got to orchestrate the entire buying team across that life cycle. And I've got to be able to integrate the digital touches and the human touches, right? Because that's the buying process today. So how do I do that? And so what that picture is really speaking to is our belief that fundamentally you've got to be able to integrate first and third party signals. I've got to better be able to understand when my world has changed. Right? When my buyers are in market, when they're not market. In fact, even internal signals. So we're looking to use internal signals around customer health, for example, and understanding when maybe somebody's health goes from a green to a yellow or from a yellow to a red, because we want to activate that. So number one is, can I get a good feeling of when my world has changed? When are buyers in the market? When are they surging? When are they existing customers, health conditions changing, and so on and so forth? And then I want to prioritize it. And I can use AI as an assistant to be able to prioritize it. And then I want to be able to drive action. And organizations struggle with this a lot, right? On all three of these dimensions, right? It's hard to aggregate and synthesize all these signals. It's hard to prioritize them for my go-to-market team. And then it's hard to drive action, right? Because you want radical repeatability. That's the only way that you're going to raise the bar. And if we go back to this notion of a durable revenue engagement model. I need this engagement model that's going to get me to more durable revenue, more lifetime value, more predictable revenue. And radical repeatability is one of the things that you need to be able to do that. So if I can aggregate these signals from my buyers and understand when my world has changed, if I can prioritize them, and then I can drive action, and ultimately action that's going to get me to the outcomes that I want, more revenue, higher close rate, things like that. And then you want a feedback loop, right? I should be able to glean insights from what's working and feed that back in as another signal or an insight back into this engine. And ultimately get to sort of this winning machine, if you will, of understanding when my world has changed, learning from what's working, prioritizing it, driving action to get to my outcomes, close that loop, and raise the performance of the entire organization.
On that note, and one sort of thing that I could be related, but I want to hear your thoughts on this, is that a lot of companies are coming up with the so-called AI SDR kind of models, right? I personally think it's going to add a lot of noise in general, right? And that's just my view, and I'm yet to see a tech that is going to change my perspective. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts in general on that piece. Like, what do you think is happening in that landscape with a few more companies coming in that, like, hey, we were going to completely automate your outbound with the so-called AI SDR, right?
Yeah.
And how should companies think about that?
Yeah, well, the first reaction is, wow, welcome to the world of social media, right? You get more attention by saying very black and white statements. Right. Outbound is dead, SDRs are dead, right? And all that type of stuff, right? And the reality is it usually is not that black and white. I spent 5 years working for the leading company in the call center space, contact centers, call centers. And those companies are really good at chatbots and AI and that for services in that. Because a lot of it's around, I want to do case deflection and try to maximize my cost, but yet deliver a great service to customers and everything. And not just with chatbots, but also with interactive voice response, right? We've all been in, you call into a company, it says press 1 to go here, press 2. That's an interactive voice response system. And one of the things I learned, and we worked with some of the largest companies in the world in that, on their customer service in that, is if you take any technology and you sort of blindly spread the peanut butter across all your use cases, you're going to get disaster.
Right.
So in the IVR case, that interactive voice response, how many of us have been in there and just keep hitting, give me an agent, right? Get me out of this thing, right? That's technology that can be value add deployed poorly, right? Peanut butter spread just too much. Same thing could go with chatbots. Same thing could go with AI. If you just blindly say, oh, we're just going to get rid of all of our humans and move to, an AI SDR, I'm going to bet you're not going to get a great outcome. That doesn't mean there's not very specific use cases where it can be highly valuable. If I'm engaging a chatbot at my bank, for example, and I want to look up my balance or something like that, that's a perfect thing to automate with technology, right? So there are places, and we're huge. We've got AI throughout our entire product, right? We've got AI in Drift. We've got AI in Salesloft, right? We can auto-generate messages. We prioritize things. There's a lot of AI throughout. But I think it's about how you deploy it. And as you deploy the AI, what are you doing to build trust in the AI? And so transparency around why we're making this recommendation, right? Where did it come from in that? I think builds trust. And we're actually seeing now, as we work with a lot of large companies, there's almost a pushback on AI in a lot of big companies, which are saying, hold on, because while AI is given a lot of hope, AI without governance, AI without data controls, everything else is like organization's worst fear.
Right.
And so I think you got to be thoughtful. I think these broad stroke statements of, oh, everything's going towards, or this is dead, or what, that's hyperbole to try to get people to click. But there's value added applications, usually in the form of giving more value to your sellers. Helping them be more successful, prioritizing their day, automating the mundane and the routine for them.
Right.
Giving them back more hours to spend with your customers, right? There's been a lot of research, right? Like 80% of the research is done before I talk to a sales rep. That does not diminish the role of the sales rep. It actually heightens the importance of the sales rep. Because when I get down to that 20, 30, or whatever percent it is, I need them to add value. I need them to have the time to commit to the customer and really deliver value to them. AI can be an assistant in helping you do that, but don't peanut butter spread it all over the place. You're usually going to get a disastrous experience. And at the end of the day, if you're going to do orchestration of all these activities, you got to be simultaneously not only achieving your selling objectives, but you got to be meeting your buyer and delivering, exceeding their expectations as well about the experience.
It's a great point, Randy. Multiple different thoughts. I had a CMO that texted me recently is that actually outbound is working phenomenally well, right? Like for him, right? And he's trying to use signals, to your exact point, and figure out how to sort of make use of that piece. But the other piece he was telling me is that like the number of companies who had started out in the AI SDR space, but also who are losing customers because it has sort of gone to that high and then it's not working as much as like a natural human trying to really be thoughtful about building the trust with a prospect or a customer in the buying journey. It seems like it's coming back a little bit, reverting back a little bit, and I think it's going to happen more. But just excited to hear your perspective since you're obviously in the battleground. So
I think you hit on another point that's important as well, right? Is that AI lowers the barrier of entry,
right,
on certain capabilities, right? You can leverage AI to do that. But what's really important at the end of the day is that AI a part of a system that's got a vision of how all the pieces fit together to actually achieve business outcomes. Because a bunch of discrete capabilities are actually counterproductive. And we've seen that, right? For years and years and years, sales tech, just like MarTech, has sort of been bought on piecemeal solutions. And one of the reasons why that was so easy to do the last several years is because people had abundant cash. You could get cash for basically for free. Right. So people were consuming like crazy, right? Not only consumers, but in businesses as well. And so every time we looked at technology that looked interesting, we'd go out and buy it. And then what you find is that the reps aren't getting the value from it, right? In fact, they've got so many tabs open that it's actually counterproductive in many respects, right? And so what we're starting to see now is more of the unification of these capabilities.
For sure.
And AI will allow somebody to jump ahead for a bit and then everybody catch up and then, right? So short term, it can look confusing. But what you really want to buy into is the vision of how that platform is unifying these capabilities. Because AI will allow somebody to jump ahead for a short period of time, but have they architected it? Have they built it with the data models, the open systems, the governance, meaning to connect to your other systems, bring these signals and that? Do you have the governance? Do you have the data protections? Do you have the transparency? What's the architecture? What's the vision? Because if you don't do that, you're going to just keep adding more piecemeal parts that don't work together. Right. And so that's really, really important as people look at these solutions to think about that, right? Think longer term, because the pace of innovation is eventually everybody's going to catch up in certain areas, but you can't catch up on a poorly built architecture and a poor vision.
It's a great articulation, Randy, because recently, a different company was pitching to me about our sales tools and like how we can add one more tool to the product. And mentally I'm thinking, I can't have my sales team use more than like 3 tools, max 3 tools, right, on a day-to-day basis. If anything more than that, they won't use it, right? And mentally, there is a block also happening in their mind. And to your point, the number of companies that think about a great architecture as the base and build products over the top is very rare, right? Like it's only a few set of companies who do that very, very well because it takes a lot of time to build great products. You can't
it's not as sexy. Right. It's not as sexy, right? When you invest in that sort of infrastructure, that plumbing around your data model and around the security and around the governance and how you're going to scale and how, right? All of those things, they're not as sexy to sell, but they're really, really, really important, right? And again, especially in an environment where you've got so rich set of capabilities where it's AI enabled, where there's going to be a lot of innovation. What's the vision to pull them all together so that 1 + 1 = 3, that they're actually working together, they're harmonious, and there's a vision of how all this comes together, again, with data security and governance, and how you're tapping into the ecosystem of other applications and systems that you have and bringing that into the system. That stuff that may not be as sexy to talk about is really the core of getting this right. And I would encourage people, whether you're looking at MarTech, sales tech, whatever, to really do your homework on that, because it is the glue that binds this stuff together. And really, it's the DNA of these products. And if you don't have the right DNA, it's not going to end up well.
Right. On that note, Randy, a couple of sort of questions on that piece. One is, like, in general, I feel like the number of people who say they provide signals and intent has just become so much these days, right? It's like a lot of noise out there. How should marketing teams think about identifying the right signals for their company that just makes a lot of sense for their business? Number one, that's number one question. Number two is, like, how should sales and marketing teams think about working together with all the advancements happening in, like, AI and like signals and like the revenue orchestration piece? Like, how should the modern go-to-market look like in terms of sales and marketing?
Yeah, so the first part of it is which signals in that. I think it's very much a function of what your current tech stack is. Can you leverage that? But more importantly, what's your business,
right?
Your go-to-market strategy and approach. What's your ICP? Who are you trying to target, and where can you get signals that are consistent with your ICP, right? Your ideal customer profile, and really the targeting is really, really important, because it doesn't do you any good. I mean, it's quite counterproductive if you've got signals coming in that are outside your ICP. Now you're activating people to go in another direction, and that's not good. So I think it starts with an alignment between your go-to-market team, sales, marketing, and customer around what is your ICP, where are you targeting, and what's your go-to-market model. We tend to be a very account-based orientation in what we do internally, and then which technology, which signals match that and support that, right? You can get signals at an account level, you can get signals at an individual level. Ideally, you want to bring those two together, because what I really want to see is I've got an account that's in my ICP that is surging right now, showing intent, and I've got individuals that are also right, and I marry those two together, and that's the strongest signal yet, right? So you want to do that. So I think that's first and foremost, that you definitely want to do that. For example, we acquired Drift back a couple of months ago. So we internally are looking at things like, hey, somebody's been on our website looking at X, Y, or Z. We want to then activate that to our sellers. And we've actually got Gen AI that can actually tee up for them a message to follow up with somebody that's contextual. We know that you were looking at this product on the great. Now I can add value to the conversation, right? Rather than just some cold thing going out to them. We use internally 6sense, for example. You could use demand-based. We use 6sense to get account level signals. Again, we're account oriented in our strategy and have specific ICP definitions. That gives us an account. We have a partnership, and we actually use internally user gems, for example. And user gems is identifying when a champion, for example, has left account A and gone to account B, and that can trigger two actions that you want to follow up on. One, I need a new champion at account A. Two, there's an opportunity at account B. So there's a variety of things. And then I mentioned earlier, like, we're looking to tap into our internal systems around health scores on accounts, right? So, again, because we got to think life cycle, right? The whole life cycle. It's not just getting things in the top of funnel. So we've got a bunch of things going on there. All of this, I think, feeds into the second part of your question, which is how do you drive alignment between sales, marketing, and the customer organization? And I think they're important. We always talk about sales and marketing. I think it's all three, because again, you're talking the life cycle of a relationship, not just I close them, right? It's ongoing. And so I think that starts with alignment on the goals. And it's not around how many MQLs or leads, or we don't even talk about that, right? It's around how much pipeline that we need to get to our bookings to get to our revenue number. Those are the goals that we're completely aligned around. And then from there, we get our go-to-market strategy, which I talked about earlier. And then you think about, going back to your signals question, that they're aligned to that. So I think the best way you get the teams aligned is first and foremost around the goals, clarity of an understanding around your ICP, your targets, and where you're going in that. And then it's about how to orchestrate all the actions, right? We each have a part to play, right? It's sort of like, football coaches always talk about do your job, right? So we've all got a role to play, but increasingly in the way today's buyers buy, it's around coordinating and orchestrating those, because we've all drawn the picture of the funnel in that as a very linear process. It's not linear anymore at all. It is quite common that, I could be on with you and you're pitching your product to me, and I'm on your website right now at the same time. I'm downloading something. Maybe I'm even in your Drift chatbot right at the same time, right? So it's very sequential. I have a meeting with you, and then I go do some research, and maybe I hang out in different groups that I go to, communities or whatever. Maybe I go to a conference. It's not a linear process anymore, especially when you think about buying teams where people are coming and going, right? Certain people are involved more early in the process. So we get closer to implementation, there's different people. So the process isn't linear, which means that it really heightens the need for the groups to be working together throughout the entire life cycle, so that you're getting proper engagement with all the different buyers in the buying committee in order to ultimately add value to what they need in order to make a purchase.
That's very helpful, Randy. That's helpful at all. And you sort of mentioned about this in the earlier discussion about like how there is a platform approach that really works in these kind of scenarios where there is a growth pressure happening, but also there is an architecture advantage that can come with like a larger platform in play. And sort of one question related to that is that every category has like at least 4 to 5 players, right? Which are like doing a decent job in terms of building their product portfolio, marketing, etc. And this goes across all sales tech, martech categories, etc. And for a buyer, the outside-in perspective feels like, hey, you know what? It feels all the same. I'm going to go and evaluate all those players, look at who fits my problem set, and sort of choose them. How should marketing and sales teams best prepare themselves to sort of really differentiate right from the beginning, so that buyer has like a slightly different perception going into the process? Because to your earlier point, a lot of buyers mentally perceive some brand or some product as like a superior product over the others, even if they don't know in detail what exactly happens in the evaluation, right? So just curious to hear your thoughts on that piece in terms of what can marketing and sales team do to differentiate a brand right from the beginning.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things goes back to what we've been talking about, which is alignment across the teams. Because a brand is not just the words and the pictures, right? It's the experience that you have with the organization. So if you and I are on the same team, but you say one thing and I say something different, the brand is eroded, right? It's not the common experience. So I think the very first thing is making sure that the internal organization is completely aligned on that, right? Clearly, you have to do some work to understand sort of what are your strengths and weaknesses and how do you differentiate. For us personally, it's about taking a point of view about where we're at in the marketplace that's very business centric. It's about having a dialogue on the business level of what's the point of view, some of the things I shared earlier, right, of where people are at and how we can help, well before you get into the technology discussion. We like to walk into accounts with a point of view on their industry and some of the challenges so that we can better understand what their particular pains are, how that aligns with the general industry that they're in and everything. And then if we can't add value, then we're in the wrong place. But if we can add value, then we double down with them and understand specifically what their pain points are that we can add value to. And again, that's got to carry through every conversation, from the very first conversation to the demos that we get to the implementation discussion. Understanding the point of view about the challenges in their industry, the challenges specifically to them, and then how our solutions can address their specific challenges needs to be carried through every single conversation. And so we've built mechanisms in that to make sure that we do that, right? That we walk in with a point of view. It's very business centric. It discovers exactly what your pain points are. Do we have solutions for those? And that carries through every single conversation, all the way to implementation. And then once you're live into the QBRs, right? And it evolves from there, because obviously your needs change over time, right? You made an earlier observation, which I think is also true. I think there's a lot of value in people looking at platforms, that architecture that is, really thoughtful about how all these pieces fit together and everything else. It's also true that not everybody buys into the whole platform right away, and that's okay. So we talk internally, one of the phrases I like to use is market the vision, sell the solution. So we're always articulating the value of that unified set of capabilities, but your problem today may only be this piece. That's okay.
Right.
But if you buy into our solution and how we can help you, when you're ready to take the next step, you're gonna get the capabilities that are all a part of the integrated solution, the same governance, same data protection, all that type of stuff that we talked about. So it is absolutely the case that not every customer starts with all of the capabilities across the platform. That's okay. You can start quick and get a quick hit. You can do a bigger transformation. You can do anywhere in between that, and we're okay with that. That's part of that discovery process, right? Yeah. Not only what your business challenges do our solutions actually help, but where would you like to start? How big of it do you want to take on at once? And then what's the journey to evolve from there? Once value is delivered and you realize value, then you're ready to take the next step. And that's totally fine.
Yeah. One point that you mentioned, which I really liked, and think that even companies at earlier stages can adapt, is being a little bit more thoughtful about the point of view, but also more about the industry specificity, right? Let's say if a manufacturing company comes in, you want to show how you are adding value to the manufacturing companies in your customer base, and not talk about like, hey, here is what tech, that just sort of disturbs the whole sort of story. And I don't think it's that easy to do that well, because you need to do a lot of product marketing work to understand what exactly those problems, have the right resources to actually go talk to them about those solutions, etc. So that's like an interesting point that I think a lot of companies can make advantage of right now, especially if they're branching out to other industries and not just tech.
It is extremely hard to do.
Right.
It's interesting. The last company I was at, we partnered heavily with Salesforce, and a lot of people talked about, well, Salesforce goes to market by industry. I always had to remind them, what's Salesforce revenue? Of course they do. They're what are they, 30 billion or whatever they are, right? Of course they do. You get to that size, you got armies of people you can put towards it. So I think for a lot of companies, it's very challenging, which is where focus becomes your friend.
Right.
Focus is your asset here, because if you try to dilute yourself and go too wide and do everything for everybody, it's extremely hard to go deep in any one area, right? It is generally the case that if you're in EMEA, you want to hear references from EMEA.
Right.
If you're a commercial account, you want to hear commercial references. If you're in manufacturing, you ideally want to hear manufacturing. And when you start to get that multi-dimensional matrix and all the cells in there, it's really hard to be an expert in all those cells. So I think being thoughtful about where you're at in your maturity and what is possible to do, how you can focus, is really, really essential. You try to go too far, too wide, too fast, and you're going to have lots of problems.
Yeah, personally, Randy, we made that mistake when we got a few early customers in the finance space, right? And then we thought that, okay, let's go after the vertical and every bits and piece of finance, and then wasted a couple of months going deeper into it, and then we realized that, there is one sub vertical in the finance space which made sense. Let's put our focus into it and go towards it. So
that's a very astute observation, because there are industries and then there's sub-industries.
Right.
And the reality is not all sub-industries, like all of the sub-industries under financial services, all the sub-industries under manufacturing, there's process engineering, there's discrete manufacturing, they're not all the same at all. And it's sort of like this notion that, we're going into Europe. Well, you don't go into Europe. You go into Germany, you go into France, you go into UK. They're all different. You don't go into Asia, right? You don't go into manufacturing. It's way more nuanced than that, which is why it's so hard, right? Because it is different, and it's more granular, and it's more specific in that. And so focus becomes your friend, and lack of focus becomes your enemy.
That's great, Andy. On a tangential topic, I think one thing I observed was it feels like all of you all, when I mean all, like the execs on Salesloft are sort of actively building your presence on LinkedIn and different platforms, right? Which is great to see, because the audience folks obviously lie on LinkedIn, and it seems like social media is going to play a very important role in the buying decisions of what we're going through. Like, just curious to hear your thoughts on, like, was there like an active, deliberated strategy, and like how did you guys execute that as a exec team?
Yeah. Thank you for recognizing that. It was very, very deliberate strategy. I think there's a couple of things going on. Number one, I'm a passionate believer in thought leadership, right? We want to be the company that people turn to learn within our domain, obviously. So we need to put ourselves out there. Whether you're ready to buy from us or not, we want to add value to the dialogue. We want to be thought-provoking. We want to share ideas in that. You know, there's been a lot of research done. At any one point in time, you're over target addressable market, 5 to 10% are actively in the market to buy. So for the 90 to 95%, we want you to view us as a trusted advisor. We want to add value. We want to, you know, give valuable information. LinkedIn is a vehicle to do that. Not the only, but it's a vehicle to do that. The other part of this is that who better to do it than our executives who are living and breathing this. Everything I've been describing about what our that's what we're using internally, right? So we happen to be in an industry. I've worked in companies before where you make a product where you can't use it internally. It's a gift to be able to use your product internally, as we are. And so we can share best practices. One, several of us have been around for many years. So we've learned over the years, sort of, you know, through trials and tribulations and stubbing your toe and everything, what works and what doesn't. So we can share that. And then, of course, we've got our internal use of our product in that. So we want to be thought leaders in the market. We want to be good stewards to the industry and adding value and hopefully thought-provoking ideas in that. And we've got executives who've got years of experience as well as using our product that we can share best practices and what's working in that. You put those two together and you sort of get the strategy.
Very helpful, Randy. And is there like a tactically, like, you know, for you personally, like, do you feel like, you know what, I need to post every 2 weeks? Like, do you like write down your thoughts on like some document, you think about it, like because it gets busy after a point of time and it needs like really deliberation sort of to post consistently.
Yeah. So how we operationalize it is we partner up our C-level executives with our comms and brand team. And so they work together. They're absolutely their original thoughts. They may not be putting pen to paper 100% of the time, but they're interviewed, discussions, ideas, then we'll help draft something. They edit, nothing goes out without their approval. It's not going out without, you know, it's going out by them. It's going out with their ideas. They just may not write 100% of it, but they're reviewing it and approving it. So it is their ideas. So that's how we operationalize it, because we've got people in marketing that can help put a calendar together and help drive the process, whereas the C-level executives generally get too busy to do that. But they are all in. We're very fortunate. We've got people that are all in. I want to share my ideas. I want to collaborate with you. I will review, edit. I will hit send, right? I will make sure it's my ideas in that. We just have a partnership on operationalizing it, but it works great.
Very, very helpful, Andy. You know, that's awesome, actually. And I can sort of think about how other companies could benefit if they listen to this in terms of how they can make use of the comms and brand team, because a lot of, at least from my eyes, a lot of teams have not leveraged the comms and brand team. It's just a few PR articles that can go out once in a while, right? But they've not at least thought about working with the execs to post their thoughts on LinkedIn. And like I see even like really big financial services companies like BlackRock and Blackstone sort of posting their CEO updates and COO updates on LinkedIn, right? It feels like it's not just sales and martech companies. It feels like everybody's thinking about how do you put out your thought leadership out there on LinkedIn and sort of building your brand. Is pretty incredible to see.
There's a little side benefit to everything that we've talked about as well, is through all of those dialogues between them talking to our CEO, them talking to our chief revenue officer, them talking to our chief customer, they're getting smarter every day. So then when they go to do other content that we need, they are learning about the way salespeople think, right? About the way the CEO thinks, what's top of mind, the way he thinks. He's been a seller for decades, right? So they're getting smarter through the process of that interaction as well.
Very helpful. And last couple of questions from my end. Like with all stuff that is happening in AI and stuff, how should CMOs think about like being on the forefront? Are there like communities, industry bodies, events, or peers they should look up to? What's the right way to sort of be in?
I think that's probably the best way to do it right now, because things, tap into a network of or multiple, right? Things are changing so fast.
Right.
It's almost to the point there is no such thing as an expert. There's an expert in various areas or at various points in time.
Right.
Stuff is changing so fast, right? And so the opportunity to bounce it off, experiment internally. So one, tap into a network of what other ideas, because there's new stuff coming out all the time that you may not even heard of, right? Heads down, I got a billion things I'm doing. You can use your network to give you ideas, figure out new technologies, and then test them internally, right? So we're using AI for idea creation and writing and stuff like that, but it's a value add to our people. We're not getting rid of any people because of it. It's a value add to our people. It's a performance and a productivity booster, right? So I think that's the biggest thing. Tap into the network to learn, to hear ideas, to learn about new technologies, bring it into house selectively. You can't do 30 at once, where you can test and experiment a little bit and figure out what's going to help you, but also be very clear, going back to what we talked about earlier about the peanut butter spread, right? Don't try to do 30 things at once. What's the one or two areas, repeatable processes that AI could automate or enhance? Figure those out, prove it out, and then leverage it, and then go on to the next one, right? You could easily be diluted into doing too many things at once, right? Because there's all sorts of things to try. Where do you have the biggest opportunity to gain value? Do that, figure it out, and then go on to the next one.
Very helpful. And then my last question is for folks who are in the middle management marketing teams who sort of aspire to become CMO someday, right? What should they think about, since you've been a CEO of a few different companies over the years? How should they think about preparing for that journey?
I would say two things come to mind immediately, right? Number one is learn the business.
Right.
And that's beyond learning marketing.
Right.
So one aspect of this is learn the business. Understand how does your company get to durable revenue? Every company desires durable revenue, right? How do I get to that? What are the lever points? How do I retain customers? How do we attract new customers, right? Who are the competition? When do we win? Why do we win? When do we lose? Why do we lose? Learn the business in as many dimensions as humanly possible, because marketing is one of those unique jobs, right? I view a lot of what marketing's goal is to be a catalyst for growth. And so that means we have to work with a lot of other teams, right? We have to work with sales. We have to work with the engineering team. We have to work with the product organization and the customer organization. So the more that we know the business, the better. Right. And then I think within marketing, learn marketing. So you're going to start off being in demand gen or in comms or brand or in product marketing or whatever. That's okay. But be inquisitive and learn the rest of it, and be willing to go lateral before you go up, right? The opportunity to have exposure and be involved in those is going to get you the path, because it used to be that when people would hire, it's like, I'm looking for a marketing leader that can do comms and brand, or I'm looking for somebody that knows how to generate demand. Or nowadays, it's much more common that you need to be able to drive all of those. And so the more that you know about all the disciplines of marketing, and the more that you know the business holistically, I think you're putting yourself in a position to be able to be successful.
Very helpful. It's been a pleasure. I know that you've transparently shared your thoughts in terms of what is happening inside Salesloft, which is very, very appreciated, because we obviously look up to companies like yours and sort of want to get there eventually. So thanks for your transparency, and also appreciate your wisdom that you've shared over the years today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you.